Hi tea sippers, welcome to an all new episode of Clock the Tea with Dr. Long. This is your host, Mark Long, and you know I bring you new updates every single week, so grab your coffee, we have quite a bit to get to. Alright, let's dive right into the first sip of tea that's on the docket. First of all, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump's tariffs are basically not going to happen. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that President Trump exceeded his authority when he imposed sweeping global tariffs. Take a listen.
A long-awaited result from the U.S. Supreme Court on the use of IEEPA tariffs by U.S. President Donald Trump. The court has ruled 6-3 in favor of the fact that the use of Donald Trump's tariffs and the imposition of those tariffs was unlawful, and so that means 6 of the judges ruling with the court's ruling to deem the imposition of these tariffs unlawful. 3 of them providing dissenting opinions, saying that they do believe that they were lawful. But ultimately, this means the Supreme Court is ruling against the use of U.S. President Donald Trump's IEEPA tariffs. Those are the tariffs that many know here in Canada as fentanyl-related tariffs. Renee, 35% on all goods.
Okay, so let's break this all down. So basically today, as what was just mentioned by this Canadian news source, was that the law that they're referring to is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which was a law written into fruition in 1977 to let presidents freeze assets and respond to national security crises as legal foundation for sweeping global tariffs. Now, for nearly a year, those tariffs had been the backbone of President Trump's reciprocal trade strategy. And this policy that he imposed was basically responsible for having dozens of countries collect levels of tariffs to basically not have a Great Depression resurface. So Donald Trump claims that this is how he's going to save the country. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the majority, and his message was unmistakable. Congress writes that trade laws, not the president. The opinion rejected the idea that the decades-old emergency statute could be stretched wide enough to let a president unilaterally impose tariffs on any size, any country, any length of time. So it doesn't matter the size of the country, population, whatever. Roberts warned that accepting Trump's interpretation would hand the executive branch extraordinary power, far beyond Congress. So the 3 liberal justices joined Roberts, as did Justice Barrett and Gorsuch, or whatever his name is. Which is interesting because those 2 were appointed by Donald Trump, right? The dissent written by Justice Thomas was joined by Alito and Kavanaugh, which took the opposite view, right? So they argued that the presidents have been granted broad discretion in foreign affairs and for national security matters, and that Trump's actions actually fit with this tradition, right? They also argued that the emergency powers are not a blank check for trade policy. The ruling here, in general, immediately invalidated Trump's tariffs under the act that we just discussed that was founded in 1977, the IEEPA. But most importantly, it did not wipe out every single tariff from Trump's agenda. So only those tied to the emergency power statute are impacted by this. But the impact will be quite seismic because we're talking about billions of dollars, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that. So economists had already noted that the average effective tariffs rate climbed to roughly 17%, which was the highest in nearly a century, with consumers absorbing part of the cost through higher prices. So that's what we saw at the grocery store. But most importantly, in a political climate that has been defined by executive power pushes and institutional pushback, this ruling stands out a lot because it is one of the rare moments when a conservative-leaning court stepped in to limit conservative presidents' authority, and it marks the first major legal rebuke to Trump's second-term agenda. So let's talk about more of these implications. So for decades, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, has stretched this emergency power thing to basically have more say-so than Congress does. The implication now is that the court has now explicitly ruled that a president cannot use his emergency powers the way that Trump has intended to. Now, Congress regains power, right? Obviously, but trade authority has drifted towards the White House for decades. So this ruling snaps it back to Congress, but most importantly, it kind of slows down the sweeping tariff action that Trump has been threatening all over, especially in places like Canada. Billions in dollars are now in question, so importers may sue for refunds now, right? We also know that Treasury may face massive payouts. Additionally, businesses that raise prices based on tariff costs may now need to adjust. And now markets will react for the uncertainty. So there's a lot happening here in regards to, what we're going to see within the next coming weeks or months. Consumers should also pay attention to some price shifts. We know that tariffs had pushed the average effective rate to 70%, which was the highest since the 1930s. And notice the 1930s was the Great Depression, right? But the implication here is that if this struck down, if the tariffs begin to disappear in this avenue, some consumer prices are going to start falling, which is going to be good for a lot of people in terms of affordability. Supply chains may start to stabilize, so you might start seeing a little bit more impact from high corporations and how they're carrying out their marketing strategies in terms of pushing products. But most importantly, we could see some pressure start to ease slightly in the business atmosphere. Trump's economic agenda takes a direct hit on this because we know that if he rewrites his trade plan, it's not going to include anything that's illegal, right? Or it might. President Trump doesn't like to listen to anyone else, and he definitely doesn't like to always seek congressional approval for new tariffs. But in this case, he might have to. So let's keep pushing on this, because now we know that the court signals it will police executive overreach, and we know this by this new ruling, right? So other implications here, we can look at immigration. We might be able to look at regulatory rollbacks, environmental deregulation, and other emergency-based executive orders. So the Supreme Court actually did their job right, and I think, President Trump just needs to sit tight before he goes to jail. All right, T-Sippers, let's keep it pushing because there's plenty to get to in regards to the Epstein files. Now, we know that the UK is on a full-scale royal crisis right now due to all of these implications and all of the allegations and evidence that has been provided by the Epstein files. But the release of the Epstein files has pushed the British monarchy, into one of the most destabilizing moments in decades. We see the arrest of Andrew Wisner this week, and he was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office, tied directly to allegations that he shared sensitive government information with Jeffrey Epstein during his time as a UK trade envoy. But most importantly, the police raided 2 of his properties in Berkshire and in Norfolk as part of the investigation, and we also are starting to see other royal people start to take a little bit of a hit from this. And no one only than Sarah Ferguson. Wow, take a listen.
Let's bring in our royal contributor, Robert Jobson. And Robert, thank you for joining us this morning. We see that Andrew was released under investigation. He wasn't charged. So do you think he will be charged?
It's difficult to say. I mean, they've obviously said that they want to carry out more investigations. They're currently conducting a search of the properties. So this was an exercise in making sure that he'd been arrested, that he was able to be interviewed under caution, and they could continue to search for more evidence and to find if there has been any wrongdoing. But it's still an extraordinary situation. He's back at Sandringham on the royal estate, and we'll just have to see what the next development is. It seems to be a very fast-moving story.
And we see Andrew and his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson. They were living together until the royal family made a move last year. No one is sure where she is right now. Why haven't we seen her, and how is she taking all of this?
Well, I was in contact with her actually about October time, and she was pretty devastated. She felt that the world was, they were out for blood. But that was before this latest tranche of emails that appeared, which seems to be very damning for her.
And that was ABC News from Good Morning America, and reporting was Michael Strahan there. But let's get into what's happening. So the newly released files include emails between Sarah Ferguson and Jeffrey Epstein. Many of them sent after Epstein's 2008 conviction, revealing a level of contact that the public and even some royal insiders did not expect. So the fallout was immediate. 6 of Ferguson's companies began winding down with formal strike-off applications filed at company's house after the revelations became public. Okay? Now, her charity Sarah's Trust also announced it would close for the foreseeable future, citing that the reputational damage caused by the emails and the renewed public scrutiny has caused that to happen. As Andrew was taken into custody, Ferguson's situation grew even more chaotic. Multiple outlets reported that her whereabouts were unknown, with police confirming that they could not call upon who they want as the investigation expands. Right? So, what has been a slow burn scandal for years has now become a full-blown institutional and international crisis. Andrew's arrest signals that the UK authorities are no longer treating the Epstein-related misconduct as a historical embarrassment. They're taking action and they're holding people accountable. They're treating it as if an active criminal matter is taking place. And Ferguson's rapid shuttering of companies suggests that she is bracing for a deeper legal and financial exposure as investigators continue to comb through the files. So, there could be other implications here, right? So, if these people want any kind of remorse or any kind of slap on the wrist, they might have to start singing like a bird, right? And when it comes to that, people want to protect themselves. So, because this is an international criminal scheme, they might start, pushing back on the president of the United States to save their ass. But most importantly, the monarchies, I can barely say that, has already weakened by years of public distrust, but now they're facing this reckoning, which is basically hitting their inner circle. So the Epstein files have not just only reopened the scandal, they've triggered a new era of accountability with the royal family, and they can no longer hide behind the palace walls in regards to sweeping any of this under the rug. Most importantly, some more implications here that we talked about before is that this is not just oh my gosh, you did bad things. This is a worldwide, international, sex trafficking, child abuse, pedophile scheme that the President of the United States, as well as several people who are within his orbit and all over the world, are connected to. And we are seeing 2 people so far face tons of accountability. Now, we don't know what that means, and we don't know why the United States is deciding to not take this as seriously, but I can probably answer and say it's because we've given power to one of the abusers. One of the abusers, Donald Trump, is in the Epstein files thousands of times with allegations of him abusing 13 and 14-year-old girls, as well as people who might be younger than that. Additionally, there are also allegations in the Epstein files that Trump is responsible for the deaths of several young girls. Additionally, he is responsible for communicating with other people and providing information to Jeffrey Epstein, as well as other people who are well connected all over the United States, as in helping assist them with trafficking in terms of knowing the whereabouts and knowing these different people and being within their orbit, because he is seen on several video footage and in several pictures of him being at parties. Other people's names who are coming out is Naomi Campbell, and we also had someone by the name of Whoopi Goldberg, right? But let's talk a little bit about that. Just because all these 300 names are coming out does not mean all these people are in the Epstein files for reasons that we think they are. It could be because they are celebrities and they are well connected during this time, and people on their team reached out to Jeffrey Epstein's team because he was a billionaire, meaning he had connections to planes, transportation, and that's what Whoopi Goldberg is claiming that her part in this. So I do want to say that I agree with everyone in regards to subpoenas for all 300 of the people in the Epstein files. If you didn't do anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. If Whoopi Goldberg gets subpoenaed, she could just show up and be like, hey, my team sent the email for a plane. I don't fly. I didn't get on a plane. It is what it is. And that can be wrapped up. Now, if questions get asked to her, if she knew of any of Jeffrey Epstein's stuff, obviously she can say no, But there's several people on that list who probably knew about Jeffrey Epstein and all these other well-established, like they like to call themselves, rich people that were behind the scenes abusing children. So it'll be interesting to see what implications come from this. But let's also take a listen to what one of the Congress people had to say about Donald Trump.
So why are Republicans so interested in Bill and Hillary Clinton? It's because they're trying to distract from the fact that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files thousands and thousands of times. In those files, there's highly disturbing allegations of Donald Trump raping children, of Donald Trump threatening to kill children. So I encourage your press to go look at these allegations. And I'm highly disturbed that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche just got the law wrong. Yesterday, he said, essentially, that it is not a crime to party with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, that's actually not correct. If Jeffrey Epstein was human trafficking minors for these sex parties, and you show up and patronize the establishment at that party, yes, you're guilty, because patronizing is part of the law, of the federal sex trafficking law. So Deputy General Todd Blanche just got that wrong, which maybe explains why they aren't investigating all these folks, including Donald Trump. He needs to read the law and investigate these people. He also needs to resign, not only for not knowing the law, but a massive, not only screw up, but the biggest privacy violation in history. They release a lot of pictures of minors unredacted, just violated the privacy of these girls. It is uncalled for what they did. The one thing that they could not do under this law was to invade the privacy of these women now, who were girls at the time, who were victims of sex trafficking.
So much to consider here. The unredacted photos that Lou is referring to is within the 3 million files they released. Obviously, there were lots of redactions, but a lot of limited members of Congress have been now reviewed some of the act itself with the Epstein Transparency Act, and they're basically saying that some of the stuff that was already released was thousands of information of people who are survivors in this case, but most importantly, there are highly disturbing allegations about Donald Trump, that he raped minors and then threatened to kill them. Not only that, and that's very clear in these files. So as much as MAGA, as much as the right likes to paint a picture that this is not here, everything is available for us to see. But most importantly, he called the distraction with the Clintons what it was, because it is a distraction. We know that there are allegations in the files, and obviously not findings from courts, but we also know that his allies, Trump's allies, and Trump have heavily denied any accusation, and they're characterizing Representative Lou's statements as false and politically motivated, when we all know that's not true. We see the clear evidence that has been presented to us, and we also see the fallout here in regards to Donald Trump pivoting as much as he can. He's deciding that he wants to release the alien files because of President Barack Obama's statement about there being aliens, and and Donald Trump saying that there is classified information regarding that, and Obama should not have said anything, because he's jealous of Obama. Anytime Obama speaks, he gets a weird, something happens in his aura and in his demeanor. But here's the thing. Donald Trump is going to face a lot of scrutiny, and I think he's going to face a lot of international pressure, and I don't think a lot of countries are going to be afraid of him anymore, considering what's happening with tariffs. And yeah, he should resign. He should definitely resign, because if he wants to go into other countries, for example, right? What was that country down? It was it Uruguay, or was it... I don't remember. He went down somewhere, he took their leader, right? And now he might be one of the leaders to get taken, because what's the tea? Now that I think about it, I think it was Venezuela. But anyway, let's move on into another topic. Apparently, Savannah Chrisley doesn't think that Donald Trump is a racist. What? That's really weird. Even if you're MAGA, you know that Donald Trump is racist, because you automatically come out and say, oh, I don't agree with anything that he does or says, but he perpetuates my policies and that kind of thing. So I do think that there is an opportunity for conversation on The View, but this has to be the most tone-deaf thing I've heard. Take a listen.
think, when it comes to the event that happened yesterday, what's so hard for me to witness is people stating that the president is a racist, because I've seen him firsthand. He saved one of my best friend's lives, a black woman who has been with him for 18 years. So he has a black friend. He's a racist. No, he saved her life. No, he did.
Okay. He's a racist. Here's the problem, Savannah, and why we have a different take on it. Many of us have a different take on it, because when you target DEI programs with executive office, from your with executive orders, your first week in office, arguing that the policies undermine national unity. When you shared racist posts about the Obamas, when you pursued the death penalty for the exonerated 5, after you knew they had been exonerated. These are the reasons that his behavior is so hard, and I don't know whether you know about this, but in the 70s, he was accused of discriminating against black tenants because he wouldn't rent to them. He didn't want them to build.
Was that an accusation?
No, that was a proven fact. They took him to court. They took him to court. The lawsuit was settled with the Justice Department. But I guess my point is, when someone goes out of their way to talk poorly about immigrants, not the immigrant, because nobody wants immigrants in the country who are killing people and doing terrible things, but the people who are not, the children who are not, the innocents, there seems to be no ability in his mind to distinguish between black people and his idea of what DEI is. And when you really look up and see who this was for, who benefited from DEI, it was not black folks. We got the vote in the 60s. So my question is, well, what was going on before that? What about, where was all of the things that you say were removed? Did people not have jobs? If you couldn't go to school, didn't you have to find a different way to support your family? That's what people did. That's what we all did. So he has not a great history.
Well, and also when you look at someone, not to interrupt, but like Dr. Gates, I got the opportunity, like many of us have, to sit with Dr. Gates, and he created the show Finding Your Roots because black people and Jewish people could not have traced their histories because everything was destroyed.
There you have it, folks. Donald J. Trump, es un racista, to quote Ana Navarra, because I think we have to start calling it what it is. And I do feel like a lot of people that are a part of the MAGA cult don't have the education on Donald Trump the way that they think they do. I think they go based off the charismatic of it all and where they're getting their news and their media and what their lives are looking like. But they forget that in America, there's more people that are just conservative. There's like a variety of populations that don't align with MAGA. And I do believe they're starting to see the chickens coming home to roost, because what's tea? Like, we're looking at the situation from what it is. Donald Trump is a racist because he released images of the former president of the United States and his first lady, Barack and Michelle Obama, as apes. He is also, to Whoopi Goldberg's point, has proven history of being racist with the exonerated people in New York. Additionally, with not renting to black people and being outright about the racial discrimination in his family and how they ran their businesses. But most importantly, I know that people say that people can change over time, but not much has changed with Donald Trump. He has gone after all of these institutions and museums all over the country, taking down monuments and pretty much trying to erase history, anything that has to do with any remnants of Jim Crow, slavery, or the progress of the United States working through the notion of this country being built upon racism has been pretty much eradicated by this president. And the MAGA right believes that the history's dark past should not be taught because they believe it shames their kids and themselves. And if you look at the big picture here, now we're eliminating information for other people to have access to so they can learn about their own past and move accordingly based on the notion of that knowledge. So they also go on to this to talk about the video, and Savannah Chrisley doubles down and she says that a staffer actually released the image of the Obamas as apes. Well, let's take a look at that, because I feel like even if a staffer released that, why do they still have their job? Is the first question I have. The second question I have is, why was Donald Trump's reaction so relaxed about it? Like, oh, it was a staffer. No, you posted that picture of the Obamas and all of those Democrats as animals, and your press secretaries came out and said that they were all in the Lion King, lying her ass off like she always does. But most importantly, there are no apes in the Lion King, and it was just a disaster, a recipe for disaster. They know what they're doing. They're riling up their white supremacist base because that's how they got in office. All of these racist people and all these, let's clock what it is, all these KKK-aligned people came out to vote for Donald Trump in droves because there is remnants of what this country has been built on. We're only 100 years removed from Jim Crow. You can't just all of a sudden not be racist, right? Especially according to Savannah Chrisley, if you have a black friend, you can't be racist. That is completely inaccurate, you know? So the accountability here on the right is to call it what it is. If you don't agree with the president being a racist, just say that. Don't blatantly say, oh, he's not a racist, because people are going to come with you with tons of facts to prove otherwise, you know? Donald Trump has been known to be racist, right? There's people in his previous administration that have called him out for his racist conversations that they've overheard him speaking about in the White House, and that was during his first stint as president. So no one just automatically melts the racism off of them when they go back into office the second time. I think we're looking at everything here. The president is already trying to pull back on Americans' rights, right, by trying to limit how we vote and how people have access to vote by pushing voter IDs. He's also pushing for mail-in ballots to be completely eradicated and pushing for a lot of executive orders to basically stall any kind of action of him losing power in the midterms this year. So pay close attention to that. But most importantly, Donald Trump is a racist. And that's something that I am proud to say. And I think more people should be proud to say it, you know? And here's the thing. When a country is ran by a racist and we've had so much progress in this country moving away from that weird establishment that white supremacists put on this nation, I think we have to call it what it is and move accordingly. So maybe don't be a racist and people wouldn't be calling you that.
A major development in the search for answers on whether we're alone in the universe. President Trump overnight said he will now direct the Pentagon and other relevant agencies to begin releasing documents related to alien and extraterrestrial life. It follows this stunning admission recently from former President Obama when he was asked about the existence of aliens.
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States.
Obama later walked back on those comments, saying the universe is so vast that the odds are good there's life out there, but saying, I saw no evidence during my presidency that extraterrestrials have made contact with us. Really? Still, President Trump accuses Obama of crossing a line with his comments.
He gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. He made a big mistake. I may get him out of trouble by declassifying.
Congress has already held hearings on videos like these, showing a U.S. drone tracking a glowing orb off Yemen in 2024. The drone fired a missile, but it appeared to simply bounce off the object. The former head of the Pentagon program investigating these objects testified nothing should be ruled out.
So aliens are real? Well, I don't know if they're real or not.
Trump says his order to release the documents was in response to tremendous interest in the subject.
Wow, so are aliens real? You know, it makes me think. Obviously, I don't take anything that Donald Trump says seriously, but it's interesting to see Obama kind of joke around about the existence of extraterrestrial life. But most importantly, he reignited public interest in this when he said in an interview that there's maybe a statistical likelihood of life somewhere in the universe. And he also emphasized that there's no hidden alien base at Area 51 and no classified proof that he was aware of. So most importantly, what is science saying about extraterrestrial life considering this? So over history, there has been reports of unidentified flying objects. But researchers have also studied meteorites for fossilized microorganisms and other organic molecules that could hint at ancient extraterrestrial biology. But space probes and planetary things, I don't really want to get into the science of it all. They have said that there's probably some evidence of some microbial life somewhere, especially considering that some planets have bodies of water on them. But most importantly, let's look about the history when it comes to UFOs. They're saying that ancient civilizations recorded unexplained celestial phenomenon, often blending some kind of religious interpretation of it. And they said that has been something that has happened pretty much throughout the 20th century. But most importantly, thousands of civilian and military sightings have been reported, along with some radar confirmed instances. And there has been government investigations, right? We have Project Blue Book, and then also the Pentagon UAP task force that exists. Most sightings are eventually explained as aircraft, some kind of like aircraft situation or some kind of atmospheric effect or a misidentification, but a small percentage do remain unexplained. So that kind of paves the way for there likely being some kind of extraterrestrial life. But most importantly, the Pentagon continues to track UAP reports, and they continue to kind of look at things to kind of keep it confidential so that they don't pretty much freak out Americans. But the question is, are aliens real? So there is no confirmed evidence that aliens are real, but there has been strong scientific evidence that life could exist based on planetary chemistry, exoplanet atmospheres, and a lot of habitual like environments that they're picking up, right? And we know that there have been real phenomena, so that's just some food for thought. Do you believe in aliens? You know, I believe that there's life out there based on the biology and the science of it all. I believe science. So if they're saying that there's likely life on other planets and in the space of it all, then yeah, there is. I don't think you should blatantly just disregard it because you are a Christian or because you are a part of a religion of some sort, because religion doesn't explain everything, right? But I do think it's important to keep your faith that that's you. But most importantly, you know, aliens exist, y'all. Thank you for listening to an all-new episode of Clock the Tea with Dr. Long. This is your host, Mark Long. I bring it to you fresh every single week. Tune in next week for more political tea and more news updates, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to get to. Take care.